Thank you so much for this introduction. We're super happy actually to be here with you guys because of course we're going to dive in the future of learning, which is, wow, a huge question actually, to solve in 18 minutes, but we'll try to do
Yes.
so. So, Josh, if I'm not mistaken, the entire idea of EdTech is to crack down on learning inequalities. And that's precisely the driver you are actually using to bring education to the next level.
Correct. No. So I think the drivers of inequality in education have actually changed in over the last few years because it used to all be about access to knowledge. It used to be about bringing more access to knowledge to more people. But today, access to information is fairly universal. And so it's not about actually accessing the knowledge, but it's about quantifying, getting that knowledge or the skills that people acquire from that knowledge recognized in a way that it unlocks opportunity. And so if you think today, two people with the same level of skill, one with a degree from Harvard, one without, they will not have the same opportunity in life. And so I think the goalpost has shifted. When we talk about bringing equality in education, it is about mostly now about that equality of recognition of the actual skill that someone can acquire. Does that make sense?
And if I follow you closely, ultimately, this means that institutional education is in the light of fire. I mean, you have this great quote. I mean, you guys should definitely take it in note. 50% of university that will not exist in 20 years from now, which means that 50% of actual universities you probably are, like attending, won't be there in 2040. How come?
So the entire world, the way that we engage with information has shifted. It used to be, for the entire model of a university was about taking knowledge that was hard to access, disseminate that, and spread it as wide as possible. The model that probably everyone gets when we talk about education is instantly a classroom. You think about one person standing in front of a few hundred, and that used to be the best way to get knowledge out because we only had a few people that could read. We only had limited access to books. That has changed, and so now the model is entirely different. It is really all about what you do with that information, and that is much more personal, which means the model of 1 to 300 just no longer really works. On top of that, the half-life of skill, the time that a particular skill stays relevant is getting shorter and shorter with the increasing use of technology, with the increasing use of automation, with the speed at which the world is changing. We are having to adapt more rapidly. And so a model where you go into a specific place for a 1, 2, 3 year time period, hoping that what you acquire by the end of that can be used in a work environment, most of the time today, that knowledge and the skills you've acquired will be irrelevant by the time you've actually achieved them. So both the fundamental premise as well as the monetization model don't really work anymore.
Yeah, well, I guess that we're in the 2020s, so we have to stay agile and creative, whatever. But let me follow up on that monetization side of the equation, because of course today universities and further education relies on the business model that they're going to sell you a curricula and a diploma and have attendees paying for it, right, and candidates. So if we're taking into account 50% of them won't be in the landscape anymore in 20 years from now, then if I'm a university, how can I going to make a benefit?
So when you're a university at this point, it is all about the educational experience. So rather than thinking about the university as a place to disseminate the knowledge, it is about trying to explore models that accelerate the learning that is happening. How do you enhance the experience so that a person can more rapidly engage with the content and actually learn from what they are engaging with, whether that is through facilitation of experiences of groups of people, whether that is through coaching type techniques around helping people become better learners, or different models to try and accelerate that process.
But I know that your tagline at Mindstone especially is definitely to try to help people learn how to learn again, right?
Correct. Yes, so there are a lot of things that we know about how the brain works. today. And it's actually pretty interesting because we have discovered a lot of things over the last 10, 20 years, but very few people are aware of how to properly use these different techniques. Even in educational settings, it is dramatically lacking how we can double the speed at which we either retain information or accelerate the speed at which we can acquire skills. And I think there's a lot of catch up to do in that space where really universities should be leading the charge to help people grasp what they can do with these different techniques and really become better learners indeed.
Well, this is definitely 50 Shades of Learning in a way, if you may. But there was also this question of, I mean, like we're overwhelmed, let's put it this way, by content every single day. And there is also in the learning space a question put on mental health nowadays. So how can we help, students and from all ages, by the way, to actually worm their way into this overload of content?
So there are some interesting parallels to draw where there's this saying, you become what your 5 closest friends help you become. There's a similar thing around information. So now, as we live in this world of information overload, you become what you expose yourself to. It used to be the case that you had to make an active decision to engage with new content. And so we learned how to try and, in a world of information vacuum, of information poverty, you made an active decision to engage with that piece of information. Today, this information's been thrown at us. We cannot not engage with information. It's everywhere. And so the skill is different. It is about how to try and get to the signal from all the noise that surrounds us. It's about saying no to the information that I'm not engaging with rather than about saying yes for the information that I should be engaging with. And it's a fundamentally different skill. And if you don't do that, it tends to get to feelings of overwhelm, where you are trying to constantly stay on top of this information overload, the fire hose of information that gets thrown at you. Often in this situation where people put things aside, saying, yes, I will get back to this one day, never actually owning the fact that there is not enough time in the day to engage with everything that we want to.
Not mentioning infox and fake news and all this type of stuff. We definitely have to battle and fight against every single day as media and as users and citizens in the meantime. Now, I mean, it's not a super techie type of future of education we're actually diving into here. Does it mean that we have to drop all those campuses in the metaverse, all these AR/VR/immersive realities type of, like formats that a lot of different startups in the learning space want to, drag us into? Should we actually, balance a little bit this future in between a super techie solutionism, type of future or dystopian type of it? Should we probably rely more on human interaction than anything?
It's a very good question. And I'm somewhat in a balance there, that there's absolutely a type of innovation and startup right now trying to use technology for the sake of technology. And part of this is part of innovation, which is that we are trying a bunch of things, and not everyone is going to be right, and that's part of the innovative process. But at a fundamental level, the way that the brain works, the way we absorb information, when you really think about remembering and acquiring skills, the more channels you can stimulate in the brain in a way, the more likely you are to be able to engage and to absorb and to learn from the information. So that's why, for example, we learn better from all things similar, if all things the same considered, we would learn better from a video type environment than a pure text or pure audio, for example. And so if you try and take that reasoning a little bit further, and you think about immersed environments, there are very real benefits to adding spatial awareness, to adding entire immersive worlds to an educational, a learning experience.
Because then you're way more focused, I guess.
Exactly.
Also.
You are able to, your brain draws connections to more parts of your previous knowledge, and so you are able to absorb it better. Now, how exactly that looks like and what the best model is hard to say, and it will never, or at least it is definitely not close to replacing the full in-person experience, because at the end of the day, we have more signals that have the possibility of being transmitted during an in-person learning experience than we have currently in a digital one. And so we'd have to balance those two.
And yet, when you're trying to foresee the future of learning, what you're saying, Josh, here is that we have to rethink education itself. Like, it's definitely not about a top-down type of like class or anything like this in the near future. So how can it be more immersive? How can you again find balance?
Yeah. So first off, I actually think talking about the world of education is not necessarily anymore the right way to describe what we're trying to do here. When we talk about education, and even what we've done now, we've talked a lot about a university setting. But the majority of learners today are actually adults in the workforce. They might not be sitting in a university setting. We are learning more and more from all the people around us. We have influencers producing so much content. We were talking about information overload. There's an enormous amount of content that's coming out there that we can learn from, but that is currently not part of the discussion. And so I would say that talking about the learning economy is actually something that's more useful than talking about education as a sector. It's becoming much larger, and there are very different models that could apply to trying to take the most of that.
Following this education economy type of tagline, then, do you assume that education is an industry or a market? Is it a business?
So, it's a very good question. So
You haven't thought
I would
about it
say
yet.
currently it is...
This is live, by the way,
Yes.
as you can see it.
Currently, it is both. So education is a market because it has very clearly identified players, and those players are transacting between each other, and they're identifiable. And then you said market and...
Is a business, a market, an
business
industry?
or market. So the other bit is that specifically when you restrict it to a business, it is no longer just about the educational establishments. And that's where the learning economy really comes in, which is that there are many more actors in the space from whom we learn today. And so talking about it purely as education is restrictive, even though itself it is also a business. Yes.
And speaking of economy, there's this one fucking figure which amazes me every single time again, is that 80% of the job of the future haven't been created yet. And so we're definitely looking at jobs taking over by 2030. This is literally tomorrow. In this respect, are we actually raising future talents or citizens?
There's another stat which I find very interesting, which is that 50% of the workforce today, of employees today, will need to reskill by 2025.
Oh wow, that's even faster.
It's even closer. And so when we talk about how we have to engage with this, we really are not talking about acquiring very specific skills. We are talking about helping people change the way that they engage with the world around them, give them the tools to learn for themselves, help them figure out what is the information they should be engaging with, want to learn from, absorb that, and then go further. So more on the citizen side, I would say.
But there's a buzzword, let's put it that way, which is really spread among the learning economy slash, like job, economy and the economy itself. This is definitely soft skills, which had been a competitor to hard skills over the last few seasons. And actually, I just want to make sure that we can go behind and beyond the buzzword itself. What are soft skills exactly? What should we need them more than ever?
So I would say one of the biggest things that soft skills allow us to do as humans is collaborate. It allows us to go from my individual work to the work of a team to the work of a company. And so if we try to look at what that looks like in the future, when AI is doing more and more of these individualized pieces of work, it will become more important for us to bundle the capability of multiple people together in order to achieve a goal rather than less. So I would absolutely say that the acquisition of soft skills is only going up in terms of importance rather than down.
Which definitely brings us back to the question of business models for universities, but also diplomas. Will diplomas be out of date in the near future?
Yes, I don't think that they are viable for a very long time. I think we're seeing signals all over the place already. So micro-credentials are getting accepted more and more. So, earlier today I was reading a stat that 71% or so of companies now accept online certificates and different equivalencies similar to university degrees. And as the half-life of skills diminishes, as the utility is smaller and smaller, it becomes more important to look at how we acquire those skills in a quick way and how you can look at somebody's capability to learn and adapt rather than to whatever they have learned in the last 3 years or something like that.
Okay, so to put it in a nutshell, and of course, there's definitely been a major trend so far when it comes to education and when it comes to youth. I mean, truly, eco-anxiety, which is not even the fear of the climate, but definitely fear of the future. When 80% of young people fear their own future, how can EdTech be a part of the solution?
So, as we go from, we talked about universities, but educational establishments, shifting from transitioning knowledge to helping people learn in a healthy way. In the last 30 years, actually, this is 30 years ago, when you think about how people engage with their fitness levels, with their fitness routines, this was entirely different. And in the last 30 years, we transitioned to a world where we are sitting much more behind screens. We are no longer as active. And so we have had to think about how we engage with our own physical health in a better way. I think there's something very similar that's going to happen at a learning level, where we have transitioned as a society. We have to now catch up, where we need to engage with the way that we consume information. We have to take our information diet more seriously and help educate the next series of kids in a way that they're set up for the best going forward.
And bear in mind that those 8 to 14 years old are definitely the future of this world. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this panel. I guess Josh deserves some applause, actually. You do.
Thank you.